Without further ado, I see Jessica Peach is here and we are ready. So as Danielle and Amy and I mentioned, this is one of our favorite programs of the month. It's the Ximedica MedTech Innovation Forum that we are so excited to partner with NEMIC and Ximedica to bring you. I'm Toonie Shartner, for those of you who just popped on, the Executive Director of District Hall and Venture Cafe Providence. District Hall Providence is a beautiful 8,000 square foot space where we host free, open to the public lounges where people can come work, have casual meetings, physically distanced, and we also offer private meeting rooms and event space that can be rented out. Right now we're closed with an abundance of caution until January 15th, but our space is beautiful. We obviously run our signature Venture Cafe Thursday gathering programming, which we're on right now. And we have a lot of non-Thursday programming. So we're excited to dive into this month's MedTech Innovation Forum in partnership with Ximedica and NEMIC. Since 2014, Ximedica has conducted this meeting as an internal monthly information sharing platform to inform its employees about the newest medical related technologies in the public domain with the intent to spur creative ideas and innovative thinking in their work. As a company that partners with leading medical device, pharmaceutical, and diagnostic companies to design, develop, and manufacture solutions for the healthcare market, innovation is at the center of everything they do. Before we get started, I'm just going to hand it over to Danielle, one of our partners in this program from NEMIC. Danielle, take it away.
Hi everyone, and for everyone that is new here, I'm the Marketing Communications Manager at the New England Medical Innovation Center, also known as NEMIC. And shortly, we are a MedTech venture studio located in downtown Providence. We're actually neighbors with Toonie and Venture Cafe, and we support regulated MedTech startups successfully commercialize and successfully raise funds. We were created kind of to fill that gap between how do you develop without funding, and we have programs that are supported by grants and are supported by our partners that will help startups get the funding they need, get the programs they need, and get the expertise they need to really get ready to fundraise. Before I shared a little bit about this earlier, and I quickly just want to mention 3 programs that we just launched that are open for registration. One of them is actually 2 of them are open for registration. One of them, the cohort is full, but is our MedTech Leadership Program. You can check out all 3 of these. I'll drop links in the chat. We do have a wait list open for next year, and this is a 56-hour, about 6 to 7 month program for anyone to take. It is free to Rhode Islanders to get everything they need to know about MedTech commercialization, leading successful startup in this space. 2 other programs that would be of interest to you guys that are also free to Rhode Islanders is we still have spots open in our digital health accelerator, and this is for startups on really if you have an idea or you have a product that you're really trying to raise funds for, any stage your product and business is at, you can apply for this accelerator. And we are focused on technologies that have really come to light and to fruition because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's why we're focusing on the digital side. The last program we have that might be of interest to all of you, and I really would love if everyone signs up, is we just launched our first hackathon, and we are running a COVID-19 response innovation hackathon. And we have clinicians and leaders that have been working on the front lines of healthcare that have been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are looking to create solutions with the help of minds from every background to really create solutions that are going to help these frontline workers, but also set us up for if there's ever anything like another pandemic or any type of thing again, that we are better prepared for what is going to come down the pipe. So I'll drop links in the chat for all those, and I hope that you guys find them of interest to you. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark Cole, who is our partner from Ximedica.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Toonie. Thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully you're staying warm and out of some of the weather that's up there in the Northeast. I'm sitting in Virginia Beach, where they balmy 50 degrees today. So I feel good. Thank you for tuning in. As Toonie said, Ximedica is an FDA-registered medical device design development firm, and we specialize in designing and developing medtech, diagnostics, drug delivery, digital and connected solutions. We've got 30 years experience in the space, and our chief aim is to partner with clients to take their ideas from concepts, sometimes from napkin sketches, all the way through to the market. How do we do this? Well, we provide an integrated solution. Basically, we've got everything that's required to take the idea through to the market under one roof. Got about 20 distinct disciplines, over 100 degreed engineers in areas such as mechanical, electrical, software, hardware, and systems engineering. We have a core competence, and the company started in human-centered industrial design. And we do all of this inside an industry-leading quality management system. So why do we do the forum? Why are we here today? Well, in short, it's because we understand the need to be highly familiar with evolving technologies, gadgets, and innovations that have come into the public domain recently. And these monthly forums have provided an effective way for sharing these and discussing these developments. And they do have the potential to spark ideas and sort of creative initiatives on projects that we're currently working on. So I will hand back to Tuni, who will introduce the forum, but we hope you enjoy it as much as we do. Thank you very much.
Awesome. We've taken quite a bit of time today, and I want to get Jessica started. I just want to remind everyone before she does that this is a monthly event series. If you enjoy this event, make sure you visit our YouTube channel, District Hall Providence, and we have a whole playlist from these programs now that we've been doing it for a while. Our next event next month is January 21st. So without further ado, let's learn about the latest wave of new technologies and inventions related to the medical space. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce our forum host, Jessica Piche, Principal Researcher and Product Strategist at Ximedica. Take it away, Jessica.
Awesome, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, fantastic. So Christmas theme for this month for obvious reasons, or at least a snowy theme to fit your day up there in Rhode Island. We cover a number of different categories. We've added COVID-19 in the past 9 months. And this month, I'm also adding imaging as a category because it's coming up over and over again as its own entity. And there's a lot of change happening, a lot of advancement in technology in particular. So we'll see a couple references on that as well. So to jump in terms of materials, for the ladies or maybe the folks who are thinking about maybe this might be the holiday time to start buying rings for various different people, I thought this was really fascinating. The academic team behind this did not label it in Instabling, but it really is what it is. So the idea of a diamond now being able to be developed at room temperature in a matter of minutes, as opposed to the long eons and eons of time it takes to pound down that carbon into a diamond format. But the motivation behind this technology or this kind of technique is not actually to provide more diamonds on fingers, but actually to provide more diamonds for industrial applications, such as being able to cut through ultra hard materials, and also provide for more protective coatings. That I need much more also in the medical industry. So this particular technique uses something called a diamond anvil cell that enables an incredible amount of pressure. This particular team's reference point is 600 elephants balancing on the tip of a ballet shoe in terms of understanding what that pressure actually would be. And that causes a shearing action of the carbon atoms that are in the components that this lady is holding in her hand. And that force forms diamonds and also another material which I was not aware of prior to this article called Lonsdale-lite, which is actually a rarer diamond. For those who are now examining what's on their fingers today, it's like, maybe that doesn't quite cut it anymore. The Lonsdale-lite is a rarer diamond that's 58% harder than a regular diamond, and is typically found in a natural way at meteorite impact sites, to give you a sense of the amount of pressure that's involved to create that. And now they can do this at room temperature and in a matter of minutes. So that has a lot of promise for some of those industrial applications that might need to slice through hard materials. Right, the next material goes into wound healing. Now, when wounds heal, particularly the deeper and more persistent wounds, they cause scars. And scars obviously blight skin. And in an area around a scar, that also may mean that hair no longer forms, that the hair follicles are essentially destroyed. And so what this combined academic team from Duke and UCLA have actually developed a hydrogel that actually reinvigorates the re-healed skin in a much more healthy way, so that hair follicles and scarring happens significantly less. And what they're doing is they're triggering a regenerative immune response during the wound healing with this particular developed a hydrogel that uses microporous annealed particles, which act as a scaffold for skin regrowth. And there's a peptide sequence that's generated from structural proteins that encourages the scaffold to stay in place for longer. And also in terms of it induces that regenerative immune response to rebuild skin that's more complete with those generated hair follicles. So really a very interesting application for those folks who have who as patients are predisposed to heavy scarring from wounds. All right, the next material is also kind of borders a therapy device. This is a magnetic hypothermia cancer-killing bandage developed by an Indian academic team. So magnetic hypothermia involves using activating magnetic nanoparticles with an alternating magnetic field. And this team has figured out that when they apply this material to a cancerous tumor site, the heat, as a result of that process between the magnets, actually can take out cancer cells. It can actually remove the cancer cells. So they're using electrospinning, and we've talked about electrospinning in the past. Essentially, it's a technique to develop very microscopic fibers, in this case of iron oxide and a biodegradable polymer. And those fibers can then be placed, because they're now fibers, they can be placed on a material like a surgical tape bandage. And then that can be connected to heat and create heat via a magnetic field. And then that heat ruptures the random vasculature of a tumor, compared to normal healthy cells where the open vasculature kind of dissipates the heat. And because within the tumor cells, they're kind of trapping the heat, that essentially kills off the cancerous cells. They've tested this on efficacy on animals, and they're planning to move into clinical trials in the new year. Another material also claims to be a sensor. It's called the Capacitivo from Dartmouth College. This is a textile that has essentially a cotton substrate that's embedded with a grid of diamond-shaped electrodes. Thinking about diamonds that we were talking about a couple of slides ago, this is where it might have a useful application. So this textile is able to detect, based on the electrical field of the object that's placed on it, the capacitance. And therefore the electrical fields are created in a unique way based on the material of the object. Its size, its shape can impact that electrical field. And so this academic team have developed an algorithm that analyzes the capacitance change and compares it to a database that they've created, in this case of about 20 items that include fruit and things like spatulas in your kitchen, and maybe different liquids in different containers. And they've been able to achieve a 94.5 accuracy rate of the system. So you think about kind of now smart textiles and materials being able to understand what is being placed on them. Could have a whole lot of implications for readability of health and monitoring various different biomarkers potentially, as well as objects placed on surfaces. This is a very Japanese technology. You couldn't get more Japanese than this. This is called a nanomesh sensor coming from the University of Tokyo. And it's an ultra-thin sensor that has 4 different layers, which include an insulating polyurethane mesh and a network of electrically conducted gold lines to act as a series of pressure sensing electrodes. Because of the porous and very thin nature of the material, it doesn't actually affect the individual person's sense of touch or even limit their own dexterity. And the goal of developing this material is actually not for the sake of turning it into prosthetics or teaching robots, but actually to be able to archive the handiwork of artisans. and surgeons. You think about some of the cultural art that is created in Japan. You think about that, the handwriting that they have using the paintbrushes, or some of the things that they're particularly proud of in their culture. In order to be able to archive that kind of those tasks and the skill level involved, to be able to have it be referenced by other folks so they can learn how to perform those tasks, and potentially even a robot at a later point to develop that same skill. It's pretty remarkable and a really great example of a cultural norm. Okay, transitioning from a more material-based sensor to a sensor that actually has some active application in terms of a diagnostic or medical application. This is an ALS sensor that enables communication of a patient. So it's able to detect when it's placed on the skin, as you can see on this individual on the left-hand visual, is able to detect small deformations of the skin as a result of facial movements. And so the wearable has a silicone-based film that contains piezoelectrical sensors that convert those skin deformations into electrical signals. So very subtle facial expressions can then create a library of phrases, words, and support more rapid communication between those people who are suffering with ALS to another individual. This next sensor device, developed coming out of Washington, University of Washington, is able to help someone who has hearing impairment to understand better understand the noises or sounds in their environment, such as, from a safety standpoint, maybe a fire alarm, or maybe a more practical application of hearing a doorbell, and be able to identify that sound. The watch or the wearable can identify the sound and inform the user through a subtle vibration, and call it out on the faceplate there. So not only is it able to be a safety device, but it can also enable someone who has hearing impairment to have better connection to the world around them. For example, just to be aware that there are birds chirping as they're taking a walk in a park, as an example. This team have developed a database of common sounds, and they've also have been given the device the feature to be able to personalize it based on the sounds that the user particularly care about. For example, the spouse's voice or not, or a crying baby or not, depending on the common sounds that you want to pay attention to in your own home or your own environment. Thinking in terms of other sensory products, this is an interesting one, the electronic nose, coming out of Nanyang Technological University, is a way to detect and track the freshness of meat. As meat starts to spoil, it gives off gases that we in our brains can detect through receptors that we have in our kind of olfactory or nasal cavity, and our brain is able to understand what those are. But now this e-nose, or this electronic nose, uses a combination of something called chitostan and cellulose derivatives that are loaded with different dyes. And as the gases escape from the sticker that's applied, you can just about see the sticker in this visual, as gases escape and are detected by the sticker that's applied to the food packaging, the dyes react by changing color and creating a readable signature pattern. And then an app on a smartphone is able to detect what those different patterns mean, and correlate that to a kind of scent fingerprint that matches to a freshness level, depending on what protein is in the packaging. We've seen kind of other examples of these kind of freshness indicators for other produce in the past, but interesting that they're calling it an electronic nose. Kind of staying in the food category a little bit, this almost ended up in my last category of, what are they thinking? But I suppose there's a useful application for somebody somewhere about this. This is called the Chilica Pods, and it's designed to measure the heat of a chili. In some of them get really, really hot, and you maybe want to avoid them in your own foods. So this device uses a single-use sensor strip that has graphene nanoplatelets combined with nitro atoms. And so when a dried chili sample is added to an ethanol solution and then shaken, mixed up, a drop of that resulting liquid is then placed on this strip. And the capsaicin, which is a compound that gives chilies their heat, oxidizes onto that strip. And then when it's mixed with that graphene and nitrogen, it produces an electrical current. And obviously, the more presence of that capsaicin, the higher the current. And then that information can be displayed on an app on a smartphone to tell you whether that food is going to be really, really hot or not, or whether you should use that chili pepper or not in your food. Okay, moving into the next category of robotics, there's a couple of very interesting new technologies that have a relevance for surgery. The robotic coloscopy is one that would give most of us pause if you were going to sign up for this as your as a procedure after you're 50 years old. So this is coming out of Leeds, University of Leeds in the UK. And of course, as we have heard or have experienced, colonoscopies are really vital for colorectal cancer screening. But the technology behind the procedure hasn't changed for years and years and years. This system has been developed to assist a physician or nurse to perform a colonoscopy by using magnets, again, to guide a capsule through the body. And this makes the approach easier for the surgeon operator and also less painful for the patient, apparently, because it's able to more carefully control the navigation to the relevant areas of the body. And so the operator has different levels can give the robot different levels of autonomy. So there's a full robotic control where you basically tell it where you want to get to and the robot does it all to get to that particular location. And allow the capsule to look around and inspect things. Or there could be a semi-autonomous mode to allow for a user manual override in case things go south. Right, another robotic system is exploring a direct competitor to Da Vinci. The Somani robotic surgical system developed by a team in Italy is providing up to 20 times the scale of hand movements without the tremor, and allowing they're particularly focusing on microsurgical and super microsurgical procedures. Think kind of a free flap reconstruction or peripheral nerve repair or reconstruction, or even a lymphatic surgery. So the console is designed to have a built-in chair that has manipulators as well as a series of foot switches that are attached to it. And the system uses a nano wrist micro instrument, which is one of the world's smallest wristed surgical instruments that's out there. And this provides a whole new wide range of movement and dexterity beyond what the human hand is capable of doing. So the console has the ability to be placed right up against the patient or wherever the surgeon wants to be in the room. And because of the size of the device, it's actually able to be much more maneuverable across different operating rooms, so a lot less cumbersome than the Da Vinci system. They've gotten CE mark approval, so they are seeking to commercialize as soon as possible in Europe and hopefully come to the US at some point in the future. Now, this particular technology takes the idea of portable surgical assistance in a robotic form to a whole new level. This product is 2 pounds. It weighs just 2 pounds, which is really quite mind-blowing to me. This is a miniaturized in vivo robotic assistant, MIRA for short, and it performs minimally invasive abdominal surgeries, particularly focused on, for their first indication, a colon resection. And it's significantly less expensive than the current surgical platforms that are $1 million plus for community hospitals. And it's small enough and weighs so little that it can be easily transported and requires few incisions because they're using a single midline umbilical incision, so which is barely noticeable post-surgery. So the device doesn't need any specialized equipment or even a dedicated room, and it can be used at the patient's bedside. And it has an articulating scope that fits through the center channel along with 2 instrument arms. And there's a camera that can triangulate and also have an auto track function. So it shows you where you are operating at all times, and you don't lose track from where you're, what you need to visualize. So it's pretty remarkable. And they've gotten IDE approval to start clinical trials in the US. I'd love to see this in action. It'd be pretty darn cool. All right, so now moving into diagnostics, Stryker has a new hospital bed called the ProQT, It's a wireless bed that has been developed to minimize patient falls, which is a big issue in both nursing homes as well as hospitals. And when a patient falls out of a bed, guess who has to suck up the cost? Not the patient, but the hospital. This bed also enables clinicians to efficiently monitor those who are bedridden and maintain connectivity when the bed is in transit, let's say going from one department to another in a hospital. It has electrical brakes and it has a throttle, like a motorcycle, for intuitive transit navigation. And the bed incorporates Stryker's already established Secure Connect technology, which connects to the wireless nurse call systems. So it enables a patient to alert a nurse that they're having trouble. The bed also is able to relay data in terms of the use or the movement of the patient, particularly the position of the side rails if they've been pushed up and down. It provides nursing staff a prompt if there's an exit of the bed, as well as movement on the bed. Interesting enough, thinking from the patient side, it also has a built-in USB port and cradle. So don't think about cup holders anymore for these kind of devices. Think about USB ports and cradles to hold our smartphones as patients whilst we are bedridden. And that patient can also charge that phone and store that phone or tablet whilst they are in the hospital. Commercially available today. All right, diagnostics. There are a couple of these kind of rapid tests that have come out in the last 60 or so days. This saliva RNA concussion test by Penn State is a way to better detect concussion. There's a whole number of different technologies that have kind of explored this space in the last, I don't know, 10 or so years. And of course, concussions are very hard to detect. There's kind of subjective criteria that can be used, and it's really based on symptom evaluation. But this is a new non-invasive test that uses a saliva sample to reveal the signs of brain injury. And how this works is that there are strands of microRNA that are abundant in the brain that have altered levels after a concussion. And what's interesting is that those microRNA actually appear in the cranial nerves of the mouth. We've done a couple of projects that involve stimulating the brain through nerves in the mouth. But this particular team have done user studies that compared patients with concussion to a control sample and able to identify with a high degree of accuracy the differences in saliva samples. So they have some legitimacy behind the premise of this idea. Another rapid test, the Malaria Test Bandage from Rice University. They were funded by Bill and Melinda Gates. This is a microneedle patch that can detect malaria in interstitial fluid, so that fluid right under the skin, in just 20 minutes at a very low cost, which they estimate is about $1 per unit if they get to a high production. And so what this microneedle patch has is a 4x4 array of hollow hydrophilic microneedles that are able to draw in interstitial fluid when the patch is applied gently to penetrate the skin. There's an antibody lateral flow test strip that detects the protein biomarkers of malaria in that fluid, and it presents the results in a kind of a visual colored strip, kind of similar to a pregnancy test. And the team have developed this form factor as a kind of a bandage to make it less daunting for patients to take, and at the costs that they're looking at, it could really make a difference in countries that have a lot of malaria. Another type of rapid test here called the Triers earwax cortisol sampling by my alma mater, UCL, and King's College London, which is a direct competitor for UCL. In fact, they got together as in itself pretty remarkable. But anyhow, this device allows for easy earwax sampling. Now, before you say, why do I need to sample my earwax? Well, they have discovered that cortisol levels actually are very reliably measured through earwax. Who knew? And cortisol levels, why we care about that is it can be a very useful biomarker for several different types of illnesses, including depression, Addison's disease, and Cushing's syndrome. Cortisol today is traditionally monitored through blood tests or testing hair particles, but There's a lot of fluctuation involved in those tests, but earwax is a reliable source of cortisol apparently, and it's relatively easy to take a sample and test quickly, cheaply, and effectively. So this particular device has actually been developed to advance to a very safe place in the ear, so you're not actually damaging your ear canal. And the tip has a cellular sponge soaked with an oil that has magnesium chloride in it to maximize the sample retrieval. It's not clear how you get the test results back. It doesn't seem like there's a smart app that goes with this, but the idea of this being a sampling collection tool is an interesting one. So don't, think of your earwax as now a precious commodity. Okay, the next device is focused on sickle cell disease, and this is a disease that affects a good number of children, particularly under 5 years old, in African countries. It's caused by a variant of hemoglobin that enables red blood cells to form a crescent shape. And that hemoglobin behaves very differently from normal cells when it's heated. So that insight, that last kind of thought there, is the premise behind this rapid test that leverages a thermal shift assay to detect sickle cell disease in just 1 minute. It uses ultrasound waves to heat a protein sample and then measure how it dissolves over time to identify the protein that's responsible for sickle cell disease. The device, in its small size, and as referenced as against the penny here, includes a smartphone camera, a power source, and a microscope, all in that very small device. All right, this next diagnostic is an electrochemical biobarcode assay from 2 Canadian academic teams. This is a point-of-care device that can provide rapid measurement of prostate-specific antigen cancer biomarkers in blood samples, which could be a really big change for how that cancer is diagnosed. So the design essentially works similar to a glucometer in that you drop a sample of blood and it's mixed with a reactive liquid, which is added to the strip and then inserted into a reader. The results are available in just a few minutes. Again, that's the big difference in terms of a cancer prognosis. And it can be paired with a smartphone to view the results. The DNA antibody complex binds with the protein of the sample to avoid a need for a long multi-step assay, which is what the traditional technique is used today to detect for prostate cancer. Staying in the realm of smartphones is helping us increasingly become more sophisticated in our diagnosis. There is a smartphone app that can now detect for schizophrenia in advance of a onset of a what's the word? A relapse. And so what the Cornell team have done is study smartphone data by patients who suffer from schizophrenia, looking at accelerometer readings, call frequency and durations, and being able to develop essentially an understanding of what is involved for those types of patients using an encoder-decoder neural network machine learning that's able to correlate behavior anomalies with a schizophrenia event. And so the result is they can predict symptoms prior to a relapse, and therefore, as a result of anticipating that a schizophrenia event is going to happen, they can encourage the patient to potentially move to a quieter space, or to essentially reduce the amount of distractions that might trigger even a further onset or severity of a schizophrenia event, or encourage someone else to intervene with treatment, which can make a real big difference to these patients' lives. Another smartphone device that's another smartphone diagnostic is the ability to detect rapidly for stroke. There's a partnership between Penn State and Houston Methodist Hospital. This uses a smartphone to record a patient's speech and facial movements. If you've observed someone suffering from a stroke, you can see that those things are very readily apparent for someone that you know well, but not necessarily apparent for someone who doesn't know them well, like an ER physician. So what this device does is taking an algorithm that is able to identify within minutes whether a stroke has occurred. So even in a mild or moderate stroke, you really want to be able to get on that patient in terms of providing some therapy options as quickly as you can, because every minute counts towards mitigating for long-term damage, particularly in the brain. But for the ER folks, what they have available to them today is actually very limited, and it's very time-consuming, involving sending a blood work to a lab and waiting for those results. So the accuracy of this technology is actually proven to be similar to an ER doctor's diagnosis, but even at a faster speed within a matter of minutes. So this can make a really big difference for stroke victims. All right, imaging. The Mars Micro Lab 5x120 is a new form of X-ray that is colored based on the density of the tissue. That's basically the summary there. So, X-rays as we know it today are contrast black and white images. And when I look at an X-ray, I usually have no idea what I'm looking at. It's not very obvious to me. So you have to have a very attuned eye to be able to visualize what you need to visualize. Well, this new imaging tech uses something called a MediPix3 computer chip that tracks every photon as it hits a pixel on the sensor of the chip. And that chip is able to process the interactions with the atoms in the body to determine density and composition of the tissue at a so much higher level of fidelity than traditional X-rays. And they can be able to convert that into a 3D model and assign specific colors to specific densities. And so this obviously, as you can see on the image on the right-hand side, enables much clearer visualization that can enable a physician to see over time maybe the development or a kind of regrowth of minute fractures, or see where a fracture has not been healing properly. And because of the color composition of blood vessels, you can now actually see those blood vessels without the use of contrast agent. And contrast agent is something that folks are trying to avoid as much as possible to help support diagnostics. So they're going to start human trials in 2021, but so far their work has proven to be very promising. All right, staying within the bones of the body, the Anti-Select Infect project, that's an easy one for me to translate from German, is examining how to minimize infections for artificial hip implants. And so what this process is, what this team have been able to do is develop a process for essentially further embedding more agents into that surface that the implant shares with natural bone. So most of the implants that are available today are, well, not most of them, but a good number of them use titanium. And titanium, as you know, is a very hard surface, but what they're using is a laser to create microscopic pores in that surface. And as part of those microscopic pores, they embed into it using something called physical vapor disposition to embed into those pores an antimicrobial silver. And then also dip it into an antibiotic solution, which is also, it kind of embeds into those pores. And then once this implant with these new solutions in the pores is put into the body, then the solutions flow into the surrounding tissue and keeps infections from developing. And what they've also seen as a kind of side benefit is those porous surfaces actually enable better integration and anchoring with the adjacent tissue and the bone where that implant is to reside. Nothing worse than putting in an implant only to get an infection to have to take it out. All right, therapy grippers in the category of drug delivery. This is a great example of using biomimicry. Johns Hopkins University have explored the idea of how to make gradual release medications more effective in terms of delivering their payload into the body. So they've taken the idea of an intestinal parasite that digs its teeth into the walls of its host to develop this new device that's about the size of a speck of dust. So we are thinking really nanoscale here in terms of the images we're looking at. It's made of flat metal, which has 6 points on its body, is evident from the visual. They're encased in China-stan film and also coated with a heat-sensitive wax. And as you can imagine, that wax then dissolves when it's ingested into the GI tract based on the body temperature of the patient. And as that coating softens, The device springs out and attaches to the intestinal wall. And it releases the payload within, and because it's able to attach to the wall for a longer period of time, more of that payload is released. And once the payload is gone of the drug, then the device ultimately loses its grip and then passes, hopefully harmlessly, through the body. And in their animal studies, they've confirmed that the design definitely delivers more drug into the bloodstream for better efficacy. Right, a couple of technologies around COVID-19, 2 face masks, if I remember correctly. The TL respirator, coming from Brigham and Women's partnership with MIT, is a new respirator that's intended to improve on the standard N95 masks that are a hot commodity today. The acronym TL stands for Transparent, Elastomeric, Adaptable, and Long-Lasting. The device contains sensors that allow you to know via a thermochromic coating if the mask has fitted snugly enough. Essentially, the edges change color. And then it also alerts you that when the filter needs to be replaced, all of the material in the device is able to be sterilized through repeatedly over a variety of different methods, including bleaching, which can be very harsh on materials, UV light, autoclaving, and microwaving. So it's got a lot of versatility across different types of hospital sterilizing processes. The device can also measure exhalation pressures, as well as respiratory rate and exhalation temperature, which could also lead to being able to diagnose for COVID potentially. And of course, as being transparent, it also helps with communication as well as expression for those people who have difficulty hearing folks without reading their lips. This next face mask is called the C-Face by Cornell University. And what it does is it uses 2 headphones that have cameras in them that are worn just below the subject's ears, as you can see on the image on the right-hand side. And it can analyze images of the changing contours in the wearer's face, or particularly their cheeks, even while they're wearing a mask. And so as a result of being able to assess facial expressions, they've been able to understand a mouth shape, the eyes and eyebrows, to glean facial expressions that then can be translated into emojis on a computer screen at over an 88% accuracy rate. So they anticipate this could be used for silent, hands-free controls of computers in a kind of quiet setting, where you need to not have noise, but you can still have the individual communicate even when they're wearing a mask. All right, there are a number of different robotics that ended up falling in the other category, just they had no medical application, but were really quite interesting. Imperial College London, and I can guess where they came up with this invention, is it has developed a dart shooting quadcopter. If you've been to a pub in Britain, you will know that there is inevitably a dartboard and some darts lying around. And after a couple of beers, there starts to be some dart throwing competitions. Well, I'm willing to guess that that's where these students came up with this idea. So this is a drone that has a laser-based capability to and a spring-loaded mechanism to fire up to 17 darts on command. And these darts have an accuracy rate pretty high of 3.9 inches from a 13-foot range, about the size of a length of a pub dart throwing area. But the reason why they developed this device, more relevantly, is to help with placing environmental sensors in hard-to-reach locations, and therefore be able to assess the conditions of that environment. A similar drone has been developed in the past year that uses same basic principles to shoot tranquilizer darts at livestock or wild animals, or a zoo animal that's escaped, for example. A very useful application in certain circumstances. Okay, this next product, called the I Hear by Soltaire, is intended to address that moment when you're driving and you hear a siren from an emergency services and you have no idea where it's coming from, based on your in the sense of confusion that you have of whether you should pull left or pull right to get out of the way of that ambulance or that fire truck. And so what this device is intended to do is solve that dilemma that you have in a very short period of time. How it works is that there are 4 microphones that are placed on either corner of the vehicle exterior. And when the sound is being detected, the mics basically triangulate the source of the sound and display it on a dashboard mounted unit. And a red light indicates the direction of the emergency vehicle that's approaching you, and that essentially informs you of which way you should pull away from that sound. And of course, for most users, we're not going to go and buy this device, but when you think about its relevance for self-driving or autonomous cars, this now starts to have some more safety implications. And of course, Soltaire is seeking a partnership with automotive suppliers who are now developing these autonomous cars that are going to be on our highways imminently. Right, this next device is also a robotic, and it's very realistic. If you go to the link here, you'll find some videos that will really make you question what's real and what's not real. Robotic Dolphin by Edge Innovations has been developed to be an ethical alternative to those real wild dolphins that you swim with at theme parks. It's been developed in conjunction with marine biologists and endorsed by PETA. And it's really very near identical to the real darn thing. And of course, you know, swimming with a robot is maybe probably considered safer for tourists or visitors to interact with and swim with. This company's also developed animatronic models for TV and film reels, and that's really what their original premise for being as a company. But each of these robotic dolphins, if you cared to buy one, would be at about $3 to $5 million a pop. So not really a Christmas present for your kid. Maybe stick with the puppy, but for Christmas, but commercially available nonetheless. All right, the next robot is solving the problem of how to inspect wind turbines. They get very tall and they get very scary when those blades are turning or in high winds. And it becomes even more complicated when you think about those turbines that are offshore, particularly in Narragansett Bay. So this is a 6-legged robot that's designed to walk on blades and inspect those turbines and keep them in good working order. The feet themselves are vacuum packed, so they can crawl along a blade and scan the surface for cracks and deformations. And they can relay data as well as a video feed to a technician on the ground or in a boat for offshore, saving the cost by a significant amount, as opposed to having a guy working off of a sling and a harness doing this on their own. And they've tested this turbine off of the coast of Fife in Scotland successfully. For gardeners out there, as it gets colder, you may be interested in this product called the Yard Droid. It is an autonomous gardening robot that rolls along tracks and holds water and herbicides and pesticide chambers, as well as a lawn mowing blades. There's a turret in the front that has video cameras you'd expect. There's an LED spotlight for dark, for doing this at night. There's even a leaf blower and 3 nozzles to release water and chemicals. It can follow a planned route that it plans out itself, so it has even that level of sophistication to mow a lawn, and it can spot plants that are on its watering schedule and shoot streams of water at them. And it can also identify a pest like that looks like some form of cockroach in that visual there, and treat them on site with a spurt of a pesticide. And it can also piss off a raccoon by shooting squirts of water at them. And not only can it do that, but it can also patrol your property and send you alerts if there's an intruder on your premises, as well as emit audio warnings and also squirt intruders with water if you so happen. Now, this is not yet available. They are planning to do a crowdfunding campaign starting in 2021 with a mid-year delivery. So it's not a Christmas present yet, but for $2,500, I think I'll hire my teenager to mow my lawn. All right, so the next robotic, I'm not quite sure what the application really is for this, because the whole idea of painting is to have artistic expression. But if you were so inclined, you may be interested in having tiny real robots do the job for you. What's interesting about this, though, honestly, is that these robots are working together as a swarm on a canvas and communicating with each other in order to paint a picture on a canvas. And so each robot has, within what's been developed at Georgia Tech, has a chamber of a particular paint in it. and so that it can able to deliver that paint on a track, but it also can collaborate with other robots to combine colors, and or when that one robot's chamber has failed or has emptied of their paint, another robot on the canvas can take over from the planned route of that robot. So when we think about, robots now communicating with each other and potentially unionizing, it's not an impossibility. All right, I think this is the last or second to last one. Dogs for the win here, of course, as the last one. The United States Army has been funding a company called Command Sight to develop augmented reality goggles for dogs, because dogs need them when they are particularly military working dogs going into dangerous areas where their handler may be not so well advised to go to. And so using verbal commands and hand signals and laser pointers have been typically used to direct a dog, but that can be quite confusing for a dog when they really are not really quite sure between what's reality and what's being shown to them. Well, this idea of these augmented reality goggles provide visual commands and cues to the dog while wearing the camera. And it offers also the dog a live feed. It offers the handler a live feed of what the dog is seeing. And so obviously these dogs have to be trained to use these glasses, which are custom fit to each dog. And the prototype has been developed and they're planning to expand to a wireless production-ready device in the new year. Dogs for the win. All right, so that's it for this month. Wish you all a very great holiday. We keep an archive both of this presentation as well as your last 6 years or so of what we present each month that we use to mine for various different projects, and sometimes clients come to us with requests to be involved in kind of understanding the depth of this. But our next MedTech Forum, as Julie mentioned, will be the 21st of January next year. And for follow-up links, here's your information.